The topic is Marcus Garvey and Africans in the Caribbean. And we have with us to talk about Marcus Garvey and Africans who made up a very, very significant part of the international slave trade in that particular part of the world. Dr. AAl-Hadid, who is the chairperson of the Africana Studies Department at Tennessee State University. Dr. AAl-Hadid, the individual countries that we are talking about and the European countries that established these particular areas in the Caribbean, these countries were responsible in a real sense for what is known as the international slave trade. Give us some information in reference to the operation of this trade and how Africans reacted to being enslaved in this particular part of the country.
Absolutely. Before we go forward in that direction, let's go back to the continent and see how things unfolded. I want to say something briefly about the Moors in Spain from 711 to 1492, and then when they were pushed out of Spain, and also when the Sudanic Empire, which was the third Sudanic Empire in Songhai, fell. Christopher Columbus then went out and he did his explorations in October of 1492. That was the beginning of the Ma'afa, or the Holocaust for African Americans throughout the world. So all of these avaricious European powers, the Portuguese, the Spanish, the French, the British, the Germans, they started taking initiatives to go around the world, establish colonies, go into Africa and kidnap people, foment wars so that they could get prisoners of wars, and they brought them over here. So it created what is known as this period of primitive accumulation. And this is the period that laid the foundation for capitalism as we know it. Now, before, in the beginning of the slave trade, they were just concerned about getting human labor power and then taking that human labor power to the colonists to go into the mines and bring out the gold and the silver and do the agriculture to produce the cotton and the tea and those type of things. And at that particular time, it wasn't not so much a matter of them using an ideology to talk about the inferiority of a people. But once this trade became lucrative, and also once they had the white indentures over here, they had to draw a clear line of demarcation between the white indentures who were enslaved for a specified period of time and the Africans who were enslaved as chattel for life. And so that's where the ideology of racism started to develop. So once slavery created capitalism, and then the ideology of racism started to develop. And what I would argue as a sociologist is that capitalism, a form of economics, created the ideology of racism. It wasn't that the Europeans had this negative attitude about Africans, because they had almost 800 years of experience with the Moors. They knew in the Greek and Roman time, they knew about the ancient Egyptians, so they knew that the people in Africa were highly civilized and highly developed. But they had to create this mythology so that to keep the white workers who were indentured controlling their plantations in their interest while they were running their royal families and feudalism in Europe, you see. And so this developed, and then eventually you created a situation in this country where you had the people divided along, lines of race and also lines of class. Now, when the American Revolution took place in 1776, of course, there was some talk about, we hold these truths to be self-evident, all men are created equal, but that really didn't apply to the Africans, because those that carried out the American Revolution intended to establish another white nation. They were not about the business of creating freedom for the chattel slaves. So they kept our people in bondage for almost another 100 years and basically had to fight another civil war in order to bring that resolution about.
And so Marcus Garvey, when you think in terms of his career, exactly how would you introduce him into this particular mix of Africans in the Caribbean? I mean, what was distinctive about Garvey that might have separated him perhaps from a Toussaint Louverture or some of the other individuals who played significant roles in African-American history?
Absolutely. Garvey, we'd have to start with the Berlin Conference of 1884-85. Now the scramble for African captives had ended. The Europeans have become entrenched in Africa. Now they're establishing colonies in Africa. They're establishing colonies in Angola, Nigeria, and so forth, and basically enslaving Africans on African soil.
On the continent.
On the continent itself. So by this time, Garvey is born August 17, 1887. and Jamaica is colonized, where he was born in St. Anne's, Jamaica. And so when we look at Garvey, I would see Garvey almost as the reincarnation of a Toussaint Louverture, because Toussaint Louverture, Dessalines, and Boukman carried out the Haitian Revolution in 1804. So Garvey now is coming almost 100 years later to bring about a similar type agitation you see in Jamaica, which is not that far, you know, from Haiti and from the Cuba, Hispaniola areas. In terms of Garvey, Garvey was a person that was from a father who was a Maroon in Jamaica. His father taught him a lot about history, about culture. He worked as a period of time as a printer, and then he started traveling throughout the Caribbean. He traveled throughout South America. He went to Venezuela. He went to Panama. He went to Ecuador, throughout the world. And everywhere he looked, he said, where's the black man's land? Where's the black man's government, his men of big affairs? And he said, since he could not find them, he would set out himself to create this. And so he left the Caribbean, and then he went to London around 1912. While in London, he had contact with a man by the name of Dusay Muhammad Ali Pasha, who was an Egyptian nationalist of Sudanese origin. And he worked with Dusay Muhammad for about 2 or 3 years with his newspaper, the London Times Oriental Review. And he learned a lot about nationalism. He learned a lot about Pan-Africanism. So Dusay Muhammad was actually his mentor. And then he developed a motto for his movement. It was one God, one aim, and one destiny. And Garvey started crying, said, up you mighty race, you can accomplish what you will. Very interesting, however. Garvey really got sparked from his experience with Dusay Muhammad, and also from reading Up from Slavery by Booker T. Washington. As a matter of fact, he tried several times to come to the United States to meet Booker T. Washington, because he felt that Booker T. Washington was the only black man in America who had good sense. He was the only one that had a good understanding how to bring about a solution, because Garvey was not interested in assimilation. He was not interested in integration. He was interested in self-determination. He was interested in nation building. And what he saw in the experiment in Tuskegee is that George Washington Carver and Booker T. Washington was actually laying a foundation for the infrastructure of building a nation. And that's why he was eager to meet Booker T. Washington. Unfortunately, when he got to this country in 1916, Booker T. Washington had passed in 1915.
Very good. And of course, Dr. Al-Hadid, let's make preparations for this second commercial break, after which we'll come back and give you an opportunity to talk about Marcus Garvey and his influence in these particular areas. And we'll be back with you following this very, very short commercial break. The topic is Marcus